When my husband asked for a divorce, I didn't cry. That was the first thing that unsettled them. His mother expected tears. His sister expected begging. Even Armin expected at least one dramatic scene, something to prove I was heartbroken, helpless, dependent. Instead, I folded my hands in my lap and asked, softly, "Is this what you truly want?" He avoided my eyes. "It's better this way." Better? For whom? The room felt heavy with satisfaction. They believed they had already won. After all, what did I have? No job, no visible assets, no family wealth in sight, no loud opinions, just the grateful girl who married up. That was always the story they told about me. I met Armin 3 years earlier at a charity gala. I was wearing a simple ivory dress, nothing flashy, my hair tied back, no diamonds, no designer labels. He liked that. He told everyone he liked that. "She's not like other women," he would say proudly. "She doesn't care about money." His mother adored that line. "She knows her place." She once told a family friend while I stood beside her, pretending not to hear. And I did pretend. I pretended not to notice the way they'd pause conversations when I entered the room, pretended not to see the quick glances exchanged over business discussions, pretended not to understand financial terminology when they explained simple concepts to me. They mistook quietness for ignorance. That was their first mistake. The truth? I studied corporate finance in London, graduated top of my class. My thesis focused on multi-layered holding structures and inheritance law in family-owned conglomerates. But I never mentioned that when Armin proposed. He did it in front of his entire family at their estate garden. Cameras, applause, champagne. His mother hugged me and whispered in my ear, "You're lucky." I smiled. "Yes," I replied, "lucky." That word followed me into marriage like a shadow. Lucky to live in their mansion, lucky to wear their name, lucky to sit at their table. They controlled everything, or so they believed. After our wedding, I moved into the family estate, a sprawling property registered under one of their holding companies. Armin rarely handled business directly. He enjoyed appearances more than responsibility. His father managed the empire. His mother managed reputation. Armin managed pleasure. I quickly understood the dynamics. The father valued power. The mother valued image. Armin valued validation, and I valued information. It started innocently enough. One afternoon, I offered to help organize paperwork in Armin's study. He hated paperwork. Bills, bank letters, legal correspondence. He stacked them carelessly. "I'll handle it," I told him. He looked relieved. "See?" He laughed. "You're good at home things." Home things. I nodded and I read everything: loan documents, trust agreements, share allocations, offshore registrations, restructuring drafts. Patterns began forming in my mind. Things weren't as stable as they appeared. The empire was leveraged heavily. Several subsidiaries were operating on thin margins. And more importantly, the core holding company had a unique clause. A clause that almost no one in that house seemed to fully understand. But I did. The Armin Group had originally been co-founded by two families, not one. Over time, through strategic buyouts and marriages, Armin's father consolidated public control. But deep within the founding trusts was a protection clause. If a direct male heir initiated divorce without cause, triggering reputational risk or asset fragmentation, his controlling shares would revert to the descendant of the original secondary founder. The document used very specific wording. Descendant, Not male heir. Not shareholder. Descendant. My grandfather co-founded that company. He sold public control decades ago. But he never removed that clause. And no one in Armin's household realized that his quiet daughter-in-law was the descendant referenced in that legal paragraph. I didn't reveal it, because revealing power too early is how you lose it. Instead, I continued playing my role, soft voice, gentle smile, minimal involvement, until Armin changed. He began coming home later. His phone turned face down on tables. His laughter with me faded into polite conversation. I never confronted him, because confrontation requires uncertainty, and I wasn't uncertain. The day his mother summoned me into the living room, I knew what was coming. "We think it's best you leave," she said smoothly. "Armin deserves someone more compatible." Their lawyer placed documents in front of me. Divorce papers, property waiver, non-doubt disclosure clause. "You leave with nothing," she added, watching for tears. I looked at Armin. He couldn't meet my gaze. "Is this your decision?" I asked. "Yes." And just like that, the clause activated, not when I signed, not when the papers were filed. The moment he initiated, I signed calmly. They exhaled in visible relief. They thought I was surrendering, but I wasn't signing away power. I was confirming it. As I walked out of that estate with a single suitcase, his sister whispered loudly enough for me to hear, "She'll realize what she lost." I almost smiled, because in exactly 14 days, they would realize what they triggered, and I wouldn't have to say a word. Cliffhanger. 14 days later, the first bank notification arrived, and it wasn't addressed to Armin. 14 days. That's how long it took. I was staying in a small apartment downtown. Not luxurious, not dramatic, just quiet, clean, intentional. They assumed I had nowhere else to go. They assumed I was struggling. They assumed wrong. On the 14th morning, at exactly 9:12 a.m., Armin received an automated notification from the primary bank that handled the family conglomerate's liquidity accounts. Shareholding status under review. Temporary freeze applied pending trust compliance verification. He called his father immediately. Within 30 minutes, 3 board members were on emergency conference. By noon, their lawyers were searching through trust archives. By 2 p.m., they found it. The clause. The one buried in Section 14. Subparagraph C, the one no one had revisited in over 25 years. I imagined the silence in that boardroom, because I had already reread the clause at least 20 times during my marriage. It was airtight. The language was specific. If a direct male heir voluntarily initiates marital dissolution without legal cause, thereby exposing the founding entity to reputational instability, his controlling shares revert to the legally recognized descendant of the secondary founding partner. Voluntarily initiates without cause, exposing reputational instability. Armin had filed. There was no documented misconduct from me, and his public engagement with another woman before the divorce was final. That counted as reputational risk. It was precise, surgical, and irreversible. At 3:47 p.m., my phone rang. I let it ring twice before answering. "What did you do?" Armin demanded. His voice was tight. Not angry. Not yet. Panicked. "I signed the papers you gave me," I replied calmly. "The shares. I didn't transfer anything." Silence. Then, quieter. "Did you know?" I leaned back against the window, watching the city move below me. Double quotes. Yes. The word landed heavy. You knew about the clause. Yes. More silence. I could hear him breathing. You set this up. No. I said gently. You asked for the divorce. And that was the truth. I hadn't manipulated him into leaving. I hadn't forged anything. I had simply understood something he never bothered to read by evening. The freeze extended to 3 subsidiary accounts. The holding company's voting structure was flagged for mandatory review. The board requested proof of beneficiary lineage. They needed documentation. They needed confirmation. They needed me. I didn't respond immediately. Power is rarely loud. It waits. The next morning, a black car pulled up outside my building. Armin's father stepped out. He had never visited me alone before. Inside the apartment, he remained standing. This can be negotiated, he said. It wasn't a greeting. I poured tea anyway. You always underestimated me, I replied. He studied me carefully now, not as a daughter-in-law, but as a variable. You hid your identity intentionally. I never lied. That's deception. No, I corrected softly. That's a mission. His jaw tightened. We built that empire. My grandfather built it with you. He had no counter to that, because it was true. Decades ago, when the company was just a logistics startup, my grandfather provided capital and infrastructure. Armin's father provided political leverage and expansion strategy. When my grandfather stepped back due to health issues, he sold majority public control, but retained structural protections. Protections no one revisited until now. If this becomes public, he said carefully, it damages everyone. Then don't make it public. You want the chair? No. He blinked. What do you want? Control was never my goal. Stability was. During my marriage, I had seen the internal numbers, the over-leveraged expansions, the hidden liabilities, the offshore risks. They were heading toward collapse. Armin was careless. His father was aging, and the board was loyal only to power. You need restructuring, I said calmly. You need transparency, asset liquidation, debt consolidation. You're not in a position to advise. I am now the controlling shareholder. That landed. Legally, once the compliance review finalized, the shares reverted automatically. The trust operated independently of personal negotiations. He exhaled slowly. You planned this marriage. That accusation didn't anger me. It disappointed me. No, I said. I planned for survival. He left without finishing his tea. By afternoon, the legal verification confirmed lineage through birth certificates, archived partnership contracts, and trust documentation. It was official. I held majority controlling interest. Armin no longer had final authority, and the board could not override the founding trust. That evening, his mother called. Her tone was entirely different from the woman who once whispered, "You're lucky. We should meet." There was no arrogance left, only urgency. "I'm busy," I replied. "You can't humiliate us like this." "I didn't. You're destroying this family." "No," I said quietly. "Your son did that when he underestimated his wife." Another silence, then a softer voice. "Come home. We can fix this." Home. That house was never mine, and neither was that illusion. "I won't return," I said, but I would attend the emergency board meeting scheduled in 3 days, because that was where the real shift would happen. Not emotionally, structurally, and this time, I wouldn't be sitting quietly at the edge of the room. The boardroom smelled like polished wood and old power. I hadn't been inside that room since my wedding reception dinner. When I was seated at the far end of the table, smiling quietly. While men discussed numbers I already understood better than most of them today. No one told me where to sit. If I arrived 10 minutes early, simple navy suit, hair tied back, no jewelry except a thin gold watch my grandfather once wore. When I walked in, conversation stopped, not out of courtesy, out of recalculation. Armin stood near the window, phone in hand. His father sat at the head of the table, though technically, that position was no longer guaranteed. 12 board members were present. 12 men who had once dismissed me as decorative, now they watched me as risk. I placed my folder on the table and chose a seat, not at the end, directly across from Armin. No one spoke for a moment. Then the legal advisor cleared his throat. As confirmed by Trust Compliance Review, majority controlling shares have reverted to Ms. He paused, glancing at me. I finished it calmly. Ms. Lena Raman, using my maiden name. That was intentional. A small ripple moved across the table. Armin's jaw tightened. His father leaned forward. This is procedural, he began smoothly. Temporary. We are reviewing possible structural appeals. There is no appeal, the legal advisor corrected gently. The trust clause is binding and self-executing. Self-executing, meaning it required no approval, no vote, no negotiation. It had already happened. Armin finally spoke. This is absurd. She knew about this. She manipulated the situation. 12 pairs of eyes shifted to me. I didn't react emotionally. You filed for divorce, I said evenly. You were having an affair. He snapped. His mother, seated near the far end, stiffened. Board members exchanged subtle looks. The affair. He hadn't wanted that detail mentioned publicly. You filed without legal cause, I replied. There's no documented misconduct against me. The clause specifies voluntary dissolution. Without cause. He stood up. So this is revenge. No. My calmness unsettled him more than anger would have. This, I continued, opening my folder, is correction. I slid printed financial summaries across the table. Consolidated debt exposure, offshore liabilities, liquidity ratios, asset duplication. 3 members immediately leaned in. Because numbers don't lie, and they recognized instability when they saw it. You're over-leveraged, I said. If the Dubai expansion fails, you collapse within 18 months. Silence. *1. Of the older board members frowned. How did you obtain these projections? I organized Armin's paperwork for 3 years. A quiet murmur moved through the room. Armin looked at his father. His father did not look back, because he knew I was right. I am not here to dismantle this company, I said clearly. I am here to prevent its implosion. Armin laughed sharply. You expect us to believe you care. I care about legacy. That word carried weight. Legacy meant generational stability, market reputation, influence. It wasn't sentimental. It was structural. His father folded his hands. What are you proposing? Now the room shifted. Not hostile, evaluating. I stood, moved to the screen, connected the presentation drive I had prepared the night before, projected on the wall. 3-phase restructuring plan. Phase 1. Immediate debt consolidation and liquidation of non-performing luxury assets. Phase 2. Governance reform, independent oversight, reduced executive compensation, risk transparency. Phase 3. Gradual leadership transition based on performance, not bloodline. The room grew very still, because Phase 3 threatened more than finances, it threatened entitlement. Armin's voice lowered. You're removing me. I'm restructuring management authority. You're humiliating me. No, I said quietly. You did that yourself. The older board member spoke again. These numbers are accurate. Yes. Another member nodded slowly. They align with our internal concerns. Internal concerns, meaning they had seen warning signs too. They just lacked leverage until now. Armin looked around the table and saw it. The shift. The loyalty wasn't to him, it was to stability, and stability now had a different name. His mother finally spoke. This is still a family company. I turned to her. No. It's a trust-governed corporate entity with a founding clause your family forgot. That landed hard. Armin's father exhaled slowly. What do you want from us? Not money, not apology. Control without chaos. I will assume interim chairmanship for 12 months, I said. During restructuring. After that, performance metrics determine leadership. And Armin? His father asked. I didn't hesitate. He remains on the board, but without unilateral authority. That was mercy, and he knew it. Armin, however, heard only loss. You planned all this, he muttered. No, I replied softly. I planned for the day you underestimated me. The legal advisor looked around the table. We require a vote to ratify interim governance adjustments. One by one, hands began to rise. Not all at once, but enough to make it official. Armin watched it happen. Watched control slip from inherited certainty into earned evaluation. When the vote concluded, the advisor spoke. Interim chairwoman, Lena Raman. The room didn't applaud. RECALIBRATED as the meeting adjourned. Armin stepped closer to me. You're enjoying this. I looked at him carefully. No, I said. I'm cleaning up something you never bothered to understand. His father approached last. You could have warned us. I tried, I replied. He studied me for a long moment, and for the first time since I married into that house. He looked at me with something close to respect, but respect born from fear is unstable, and I knew something they didn't. The Dubai expansion he was worried about? That wasn't the biggest threat. There was another liability, one hidden deeper than the divorce clause, one that could either solidify my control permanently or destroy all of us, and I had just uncovered it. Cliffhanger. The restructuring uncovers a secret offshore account tied directly to Armin, and what it contains could trigger criminal investigation. Power is loud when it's inherited, it's quiet when it's earned. 3 weeks into the restructuring, I stopped being the ex-wife who stole control. I became something else. Necessary. Banks returned calls faster. Consultants stopped questioning my authority. Board members began scheduling private meetings with me instead of Armin. But control always uncovers what comfort hides. And comfort had been hiding something dangerous. It appeared in a routine audit. One of the forensic analysts flagged a discrepancy. A dormant offshore account connected to a subsidiary. Used during the early stages of the Dubai expansion. At first glance, it looked like a strategic reserve. But the transfers didn't align with project expenditures. They aligned with personal withdrawals. Large ones. I requested full documentation. The deeper we looked, the clearer it became. The account wasn't authorized by the board, it wasn't declared in risk disclosures, and the signature approving it. Armin's. The room felt smaller when I called the emergency compliance meeting. He arrived late, defensive already. What is this about now? I slid the printed transaction sheets toward him. He scanned the first page, then the second. His face drained of color. It's temporary liquidity movement, he said quickly. Standard executive discretion. It's undeclared capital extraction, I replied calmly. His father stood slowly. How much? I answered before Armin could. Enough to trigger regulatory investigation. Silence. Heavy, not dramatic. Dangerous. Because this wasn't about marriage. This was about criminal exposure. Why would you do this? His father asked. Armin ran a hand through his hair. I was securing flexibility. In case the expansion failed. You were siphoning funds, I corrected. His eyes snapped toward me. You're loving this. No, I said quietly. I'm preventing prison. That shifted the energy. Board members exchanged uneasy glances. If regulators discovered the account before we disclosed it internally, the entire company could face charges: fraud, misrepresentation, breach of fiduciary duty. The stock would collapse. The empire would not survive that. Armin's mother entered halfway through the discussion, clearly summoned in panic. What's happening? No one answered immediately, because there was no elegant way to say it. Your son just jeopardized everything. Armin's voice lowered. You won. Isn't this enough? That accusation carried exhaustion, not arrogance. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since the divorce. He wasn't evil. He was careless, spoiled by protection, shielded from consequence, and now consequence had found him. This isn't about winning, I said. It's about containment. His father leaned forward. What are our options? There were two. Option 1. Report immediately. Face investigation. Possible criminal charges. Public scandal. Option 2. Voluntary internal disclosure. Repayment restructuring. Executive suspension. And negotiated regulatory compliance before formal audit exposure. Both painful. Only one survivable. Armin looked at me. You'd send me to prison. If I wanted revenge, I said softly, I would have exposed this the day I found it. That was true. Instead, I had called a closed compliance session. I was protecting the company and him. That realization landed slowly across the room. The woman they had mocked, dismissed, divorced was now the only barrier between them and collapse. His father spoke first. What do you recommend, Chairwoman? Chairwoman, the word held no mockery now, only acknowledgement. Immediate executive suspension for Armin, I said evenly. Full repayment schedule drafted within 48 hours. Voluntary disclosure to regulators framed as internal correction, not external discovery. And me? Armin asked quietly. You stepped down from operational authority. He laughed faintly. You've taken everything. No, I said. You gave it away. That silence wasn't hostile anymore. It was reflective. His mother finally sat down. He made mistakes. He's young. He's 32. I replied, not cruel, just factual. The board voted. Unanimous. Armin was suspended pending internal review, but not prosecuted, not exposed publicly, because I structured it differently. Within a month, the Dubai expansion was downsized. Debt was restructured. The offshore account was disclosed and absorbed legally under corrective governance. No scandal. No headlines, just quiet reform. One evening, as I reviewed final compliance updates, Armin requested to see me alone. We met in the same boardroom where everything had shifted. He looked tired, smaller somehow. I misjudged you, he said, yes. No softness in the answer, no cruelty either. I thought you needed us. I never needed you. I said gently, I chose you. That truth hurt, more than anger. He nodded slowly. I thought you were simple. I was peaceful. Another silence. Then, do you hate me? I considered the question. No. And that was honest. Hate requires emotional investment. What I felt now was distance. I didn't take control to destroy you, I said. I took control because someone had to. He looked around the room. This was supposed to be mine. It still can be, I replied, if you learn how to carry it. Power isn't inheritance, it's responsibility. Weeks later, I stepped down as interim chair, not because I was forced, because restructuring was complete. The board appointed a performance-based leadership committee, Armin included, but without unchecked authority, control became balanced, transparent, stable. The empire survived, but it changed. And so did I, the day I walked out of that estate with one suitcase. They thought I had lost everything. What I actually lost was illusion. They believed they divorced a weak girl. They believed I took revenge. They believed power was stolen. They were wrong. I didn't take their empire. I protected it. I didn't destroy their legacy. I corrected it. And in the end, the most powerful thing I did was choose not to destroy the man who tried to discard me. Because real power isn't about punishment. It's about knowing you could have ended everything and choosing not to.